My daughter and her mother-in-law tried to ban me from the wedding, but I took action. They said I wasn't good enough for their perfect wedding. They were wrong. Picture this. You're standing in your cramped apartment kitchen, holding a wedding invitation with your own daughter's name on it, but there's no mention of you walking her down the aisle. No mention of you at all, actually. The gold embossing catches the light from your flickering overhead bulb, and you realize that somehow you've become the embarrassment they want to hide. That was me 3 months ago, 52 years old, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and apparently not worthy of witnessing my own daughter's happiest day. But here's the thing about underestimating a black woman who's been fighting her whole life. We don't go down without swinging. And honey, was I about to swing? Chapter 1. The phone call that changed everything. My name is Dorothy Mae Washington, and I've been through hell and back raising my daughter Jasmine as a single mother in Chicago. When she called me that Tuesday evening in March, I was just getting home from my second job, cleaning offices downtown after spending the day stocking shelves at the grocery store. My feet were killing me, my back ached, and all I wanted was to sink into my old recliner with a cup of tea. Mama. Jasmine's voice sounded different, distant, like she was calling from another planet instead of her fancy apartment on the north side. We need to talk. I should have known right then, should have heard the warning bells in the way she said we instead of I, but I was tired and I was happy my baby girl was calling, so I settled into my chair and smiled. What's on your mind, sweetheart? How are the wedding plans coming along? The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, she cleared her throat. That's what I'm calling about, Mama. About the wedding. Oh, good. I've been meaning to ask about my dress. I found this beautiful navy blue number at the thrift store, and I think with some alterations... Mama, stop. Her voice was sharp now, nothing like my sweet Jasmine. That's just it, about you. About you being at the wedding. My heart started doing this strange stuttering thing in my chest. What about me being at the wedding, baby? Another pause. Then, Richard's mother thinks, we think, it might be better if you didn't attend. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped, my hand flying to my chest. Excuse me? It's just that it's going to be such a high-profile event, Mama. Richard's family has a certain reputation to maintain, and with all the photographers and society people... She kept talking, but I couldn't hear anything over the roaring in my ears. My own daughter, my baby girl that I raised by myself, working my fingers to the bone, sacrificing everything so she could go to college, so she could make something of herself. She was telling me I wasn't good enough for her wedding. Are you listening to me, Mama? I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. You're telling me I can't come to my own daughter's wedding? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Jasmine? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds exactly like that. I heard another voice in the background, Richard's mother, Victoria Pemberton. I'd met her exactly twice, and both times she'd looked at me like I was something she'd scrape off her designer shoe. Now I could hear her whispering urgently to my daughter. Mama, Jasmine said, and now she sounded like she was crying. I'm sorry, I really am, but this is important to Richard's family and to my future. You understand, right? You've always wanted what's best for me. What's best for her. As if her own mother being present at her wedding wasn't what's best for her. I hung up the phone. Chapter 2. The Weight of Rejection. I sat in that chair for I don't know how long, staring at the phone like it might ring again, and my daughter might tell me it was all a terrible joke. But it didn't ring. The apartment was silent except for the tick of the old clock on my kitchen wall and the sound of my neighbors arguing through the thin walls. 25 years. 25 years I'd been both mother and father to that girl. I remembered her first day of school. How she cried and clung to my leg until I promised I'd be right there when she got out. I remembered staying up all night when she had pneumonia at age 8, holding her while she struggled to breathe, praying to every god I could think of to make her better. I remembered working 3 jobs when she was in high school so she could take dance lessons, so she could go on the senior trip, so she could have the prom dress she wanted. I remembered the pride in her eyes when she graduated valedictorian, how she'd grabbed my hand and said, "We did it, Mama. We did it together. We did it together." But apparently, together had an expiration date. I looked around my small apartment, the same place we'd lived since she was 5 years old. The walls needed painting, the carpet was worn thin, and half the outlets didn't work properly, but it was home. It was where I'd read her bedtime stories, helped her with homework, taught her to be strong and proud of who she was. Or so I thought. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jasmine. "I love you, Mama. This doesn't change that. I just need you to understand." Understand. How do you understand your own child being ashamed of you? I got up and went to my bedroom, to the old shoebox where I kept all of Jasmine's pictures and school papers. There she was at age 6, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing she'd made of the 2 of us. The figures were stick-thin, but she'd been careful to draw my hair in its natural state. Big and beautiful, she'd always said. In the drawing, we were holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, in her careful first-grade handwriting, "My mama is the best mama in the world." I closed the box and cried until I had no tears left. Chapter 3. The Mother-in-Law's Visit. 3 days passed without a word from Jasmine. I went to work, came home, ate my solitary dinners, and tried to pretend my heart wasn't broken. But on Friday evening, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw her, Victoria Pemberton, in all her perfectly coiffed glory. Even through the distorted lens, I could see she was dressed like she was attending a board meeting instead of visiting a rundown apartment building on the south side. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I've never been one to run from a fight. I opened the door and stood there, not inviting her in. Mrs. Pemberton. Dorothy. She said my name like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "May I come in? We need to talk." I stepped aside, watching as she took in my small living room with barely concealed disdain. She perched on the edge of my couch like she was afraid it might contaminate her $1,000 suit. "I suppose you're here to explain why I'm not welcome at my daughter's wedding," I said, settling into my recliner. Victoria crossed her legs and gave me what I'm sure she thought was a sympathetic smile. "I'm here because I care about Jasmine's future, and Richard's, of course." "Of course. You have to understand, Dorothy, this wedding is going to be quite the affair. We're expecting over 300 guests, including several prominent business leaders, politicians, and members of Chicago's social elite. There will be photographers from the society pages." I waited. She was building up to something, and I wanted to hear her say it. "Jasmine has worked so hard to fit into our world," she continued. "She's educated, cultured, beautiful, but she's new to our social circle. People will be watching, judging, and if they see what, Mrs. Pemberton?" She had the grace to look uncomfortable, but only for a moment. "If they see that her background is different from what they expect, it could impact her acceptance into our community. It could hurt Richard's business relationships. You understand?" "No," I said quietly. "I don't understand. Why don't you explain it to me?" Her mask slipped just a little. "You're not exactly the image of a society mother-in-law, Dorothy. You work retail jobs, you live in this," she gestured around my apartment, "neighborhood. And frankly, you don't have the physical presentation that would complement such an elegant affair." There it was. She was calling me fat, poor, and embarrassing, all of which were probably true, but hearing it said out loud in my own home about my own daughter's wedding, it took my breath away. "I see." I kept my voice level, though inside I was screaming. "And Jasmine agrees with this assessment?" Victoria's smile turned almost pitying. Jasmine loves you, of course, but she also loves Richard, and she wants what's best for their future together. Sometimes that means making difficult choices. And you're here to make sure I don't interfere with that choice. I'm here to offer you something." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "There's a check in here, enough to cover several months of expenses, maybe even help you find a nicer place to live. All I ask is that you don't make a scene about the wedding. Let Jasmine start her new life without complications." I stared at that envelope like it was a snake. "You're trying to buy me off." "I'm trying to help everyone move forward in the best possible way." I stood up. "Get out! Dorothy, get out of my house now." She stood as well, smoothing down her skirt. "I hope you'll reconsider, for Jasmine's sake." After she left, I sat back down and stared at the door for a long time. The woman had actually tried to pay me to stay away from my own daughter's wedding. The audacity was breathtaking. But you know what was worse? A tiny part of me, a part I hated, actually considered it. Because maybe they were right. Maybe I would be an embarrassment. Maybe I would stick out like a sore thumb among all those fancy people. Maybe I would hurt Jasmine's chances at happiness. Maybe I wasn't good enough. That night, I barely slept. But somewhere in the early hours of the morning, as I lay staring at the ceiling, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something that felt an awful lot like anger and determination. Chapter 4. The Plan Takes Shape. I called in sick to work on Monday. I never call in sick, can't afford to, but I needed time to think. More importantly, I needed time to plan. Because here's the thing about Dorothy Mae Washington that Victoria Pemberton didn't know. I don't give up. Ever. When Jasmine's father walked out on us when she was 3, I didn't give up. When I was working 18-hour days just to keep a roof over our heads, I didn't give up. When the doctors said I had diabetes and high blood pressure from all the stress and I couldn't afford the medications, I didn't give up. And I sure as hell wasn't going to give up on being at my daughter's wedding. I started with research, thanks to Jasmine's social media posts and some careful internet searching. I found out everything I could about this wedding. It was being held at the Palmer House Hilton in downtown Chicago, Saturday, June 15th at 4 p.m. The reception would be in the Grand Ballroom. I also learned that Victoria Pemberton was quite the socialite. She was on the boards of several charities, hosted fundraising galas, and was known for her refined taste and impeccable standards. She'd been featured in Chicago Magazine's Women of Influence issue just last year. But most importantly, I learned that she valued her reputation above all else, which gave me an idea. I spent the next few days calling old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years. Jasmine didn't know about all the connections I'd made during my 20-plus years of working various jobs around the city. She didn't know about Mrs. Chen, whose house I'd cleaned for 10 years and who'd become like a grandmother to her. She didn't know about Marcus, who'd worked security at one of my office cleaning jobs and had gone on to start his own successful catering business. She didn't know about Sophia, who I'd met at the community college when I was taking night classes, and who was now a successful event photographer. One by one, I started making calls. "Mrs. Chen, it's Dorothy Washington, Jasmine's mother. I need to ask you for a favor." Chapter 5. Allies in unexpected places, Mrs. Chen was the first to say yes without hesitation. At 83, she was still sharp as a tack and had more connections in Chicago's business community than most people realized. Her late husband had been a successful businessman, and she'd never lost touch with that world. "Dorothy," she said in her precise English, "that girl doesn't know how lucky she is to have you as a mother. Of course I'll help." Marcus was next. When I explained the situation, he was quiet for a long moment. "So, let me get this straight," he said finally. "Your daughter and some rich lady think you're not good enough for this wedding?" "That's about the size of it." "Well, that's just wrong. You raised that girl right, Dorothy. I remember how proud you were when she got that scholarship. You worked your butt off for her. Will you help me, Marcus?" Lady, I'd be honored to help you. What do you need? Sophia was emotional when I called her. She'd always had a soft spot for family drama, probably because her own family had gone through similar struggles. They want to exclude you from your own daughter's wedding? She said, her accent thickening with outrage. No, this is not acceptable. We're going to fix this, Dorothy, trust me. By the end of the week, I had assembled quite the team. Mrs. Chen was going to help with social connections. Marcus was handling logistics. Sophia was covering documentation. And I had a few other people lined up for various parts of what I was starting to think of as the plan. But I needed one more thing, something that would ensure everything went smoothly. I needed to talk to someone inside the wedding party. Chapter 6: An Unexpected Ally. It took me a while to work up the courage, but finally I called Richard's younger brother, Michael. I'd met him at the engagement party, the one I'd apparently been allowed to attend because it was just family and close friends, and he'd seemed nice enough. More importantly, he'd seemed uncomfortable with some of his mother's more obvious snubs toward me. Mrs. Washington? He sounded surprised to hear from me. Hello, Michael. I was wondering if we could talk. There was a pause. Is this about the wedding? Because I heard about what happened. What did you hear exactly? Another pause, longer this time. I heard that Mom thinks it would be better if you didn't attend. And I heard that Jasmine agreed. And what do you think about that? He sighed deeply. I think it's messed up, Mrs. Washington. I really do. Jasmine's been talking about you walking her down the aisle since she was a kid. I remember her mentioning it at Christmas a few years ago. My heart clenched. She'd wanted me to walk her down the aisle. Michael, I said carefully, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to attend a wedding they'd been uninvited from, how might they go about that? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, hypothetically? Hypothetically. Well, hypothetically, that person would need to know the exact timeline of events. They'd need to know where the bridal party would be getting ready, when the photos would be taken, when the ceremony would actually start, not just the time on the invitation. They'd need to know about security arrangements and seating charts and all kinds of details that only someone on the inside would know. Hypothetically, and that someone on the inside would have to be pretty upset about the whole situation to share that information. And are you upset about the situation, Michael? Mrs. Washington, I've been upset about it since the day I heard. My brother's marrying a wonderful woman, and that wonderful woman's mother should be there to see it happen. Period. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after we pull this off. We? He'd said we. Chapter 7. The dress. With Michael's inside information and my growing network of allies, the plan was starting to come together, but I still had one major problem. What to wear? I couldn't show up in the navy blue thrift store dress I'd originally planned, not anymore. This wasn't just about attending my daughter's wedding, it was about making a statement. It was about showing Victoria Pemberton and everyone else that Dorothy Mae Washington might not have money, but she had dignity, strength, and people who believed in her. I needed a dress that would command respect. The problem was I had about $50 in my clothing budget, and that wasn't going to buy the kind of dress I needed for this mission. That's when Michael appeared at my table. Mrs. Washington, he said, extending his hand, would you honor me with a dance? I looked up at him, confused. I don't understand. My brother may have married your daughter, but that makes you family now. And family dances together. As we moved onto the dance floor, other couples joined us, but I barely noticed them. All I could see was Jasmine, still dancing with Richard's father, but watching me over his shoulder with tears in her eyes. When the song ended, there was a moment of silence. Then Jasmine broke away from her father-in-law and walked directly toward me. Mama, she said, her voice breaking, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She threw her arms around me, not caring that she was crushing her beautiful dress or that half the reception was watching us. I held my daughter and felt the last of my anger melt away. I know. Baby, I whispered. I know. I was scared, she said into my shoulder. I was so scared of not fitting in, of not being good enough for this family, that I forgot what really matters. I forgot that you taught me to be strong and proud of who I am. You are good enough, Jasmine. You've always been good enough. And so am I. She pulled back to look at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. You look so beautiful, Mama. Like a queen. Your mama's always been a queen, said a voice behind us. We turned to see Richard approaching, looking nervous but determined. Mrs. Washington, I owe you an apology. What happened? What my mother suggested. It was wrong. You should have been part of this wedding from the beginning. I studied my new son-in-law for a moment. And what do you plan to do about your mother's behavior, Richard? He took a deep breath. I plan to make it very clear that my wife's family is my family, and anyone who can't respect that won't be welcome in our home. Victoria appeared at his shoulder, her face tight with disapproval. Richard, surely you don't mean... I mean exactly what I said, Mother. Mrs. Washington is Jasmine's mother, which makes her my mother-in-law. She will be treated with the respect she deserves. Or you and I are going to have a serious problem. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria looked around at the faces watching her, guests who had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening, and I could see the moment she realized she'd lost. Of course, she said stiffly. Mrs. Washington is family now. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was a concession, and sometimes that's all you can get. Chapter 8. Final Preparations. The week before the wedding was a whirlwind of final preparations. Michael had provided detailed information about the wedding timeline, including the fact that there would be a receiving line before the ceremony where family members would greet important guests. According to him, Victoria had specifically planned this so that people would see who was and wasn't part of the official family. Sophia had arranged to be one of the photographers for the event. Not the main photographer, but part of the team covering different angles. This would give her access to the venue and the ability to document whatever happened. Marcus had worked out the logistics of getting me into the Palmer house without attracting too much attention. He had connections with the hotel staff from his catering days, and he'd arranged for me to enter through a service entrance and make my way to the grand ballroom through back corridors. But the most important part of the plan was the timing. I couldn't just show up randomly. I needed to make my appearance at exactly the right moment for maximum impact but minimum disruption to Jasmine's actual wedding ceremony. Michael and I had worked out that the perfect moment would be right after the processional, but before the actual vows began. There's always a moment in weddings where the officiant asks if anyone objects to the union, and then there's usually a pause before the vows start. That would be my moment. 3 days before the wedding, I got a call from Jasmine. I hadn't heard from her since that awful phone call 3 weeks earlier. Mama, her voice was small, uncertain. Hello, baby. How are you doing? I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she thought I was doing. Instead, I said, I'm fine, sweetheart. How are the final wedding preparations going? They're good. Everything's coming together. A pause. Mama, I want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. I know that. Jasmine. And I want you to know that this whole thing with the wedding, it's not because I'm ashamed of you or anything like that. It's just what, baby? She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. It's just so complicated. Richard's family has certain expectations, and I'm trying so hard to fit in. And Victoria said... What did Victoria say? She said that if I wanted to be accepted in their social circle, I needed to think about appearances. She said that people would judge Richard's business prospects based on who was at our wedding. She said... She trailed off. She said what, Jasmine? She said that you wouldn't be comfortable anyway, that you'd feel out of place among all those people. She said it would be kinder to everyone if you just didn't come. Kinder to everyone. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. And what do you think, baby? Do you think I'd be uncomfortable? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I don't know, Mama, maybe. I mean, it's going to be really fancy, and there are going to be all these important people, and I'm just a poor black woman who works retail jobs and lives in a rundown apartment. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, sweetheart. I can hear it in your voice. More crying. I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. Yes, you do, Jasmine. You've always known what to do. You just have to decide if you're brave enough to do it. After I hung up, I sat in my chair and thought about that little girl who used to draw pictures of us holding hands under rainbows. Somewhere along the way, she'd started believing that her mama wasn't good enough to stand under the rainbow with her. Well, I was about to prove her wrong. Chapter 9. The Day Arrives. Saturday, June 15th, dawned clear and beautiful. Perfect wedding weather, as they say. I woke up early. Despite having barely slept and went through my morning routine slowly and deliberately, I wanted to savor every moment because I knew this day would change everything between Jasmine and me, one way or another. Mrs. Chen had insisted on having her hairdresser come to my apartment that morning. "You're going to be photographed," she'd said matter-of-factly. "You need to look perfect." The hairdresser, a young woman named Keisha, worked magic with my hair. She shaped my natural curls into an elegant updo that framed my face beautifully. "Girl," she said, standing back to admire her work, "you look like royalty." Next came the makeup. I don't usually wear much more than lipstick and powder, but today called for something special. Keisha had brought a whole kit with her, and she worked with the concentration of an artist. When she was done, I looked in the mirror and gasped. The woman staring back at me was stunning. The makeup enhanced my features without hiding them, and my skin seemed to glow. Combined with the elegant hairstyle and the gorgeous dress Mrs. Chen had provided, I looked like I belonged at any high society event. "You ready for this?" Keisha asked, packing up her supplies. "Ready as I'll ever be." Marcus arrived at 2 p.m. to drive me to the Palmer house. He was dressed in a sharp black suit. He was going to pose as hotel security to help get me into position, and when he saw me, he whistled low. "Dorothy Washington, you look like $1,000,000. That's the idea." The drive downtown was quiet. I spent the time going over the plan one more time, making sure I knew exactly where I needed to be and when. Michael had texted me that morning to confirm that everything was still on schedule. The ceremony would start at 4 p.m. sharp, with the processional beginning at 3:50. At 3:15, Marcus and I entered the Palmer house through the service entrance he'd arranged. The hallways were bustling with hotel staff preparing for various events, and no one gave us a second glance. Marcus led me through a maze of corridors until we reached a small alcove near the grand ballroom. "This is it," he said quietly. "From here, you can see into the ballroom, but you're hidden from view. At exactly 3:52, I want you to walk through that door and take your place." I peered around the corner. The grand ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, white flowers everywhere, and rows of chairs filled with elegantly dressed guests. At the front, I could see Richard and his groomsmen waiting nervously. And then I saw her. Victoria Pemberton, resplendent in champagne-colored silk, making her way down the aisle to her seat in the front row. She looked satisfied, confident, like a woman who had successfully orchestrated the perfect social event. She had no idea what was coming. Chapter 10. The Moment of Truth. At 3:50, the processional music began. I watched from my hiding spot as the bridesmaids made their way down the aisle in their flowing lavender dresses. Then came the maid of honor, Jasmine's college roommate, who had taken the place I should have held. And then the wedding march began, and there was my daughter, even from a distance. Even through my hurt and anger, she was the most beautiful bride I'd ever seen. Her dress was elegant and classic, her face radiant behind her veil. She walked alone down that long aisle, and my heart broke a little more with each step she took. This was it. 3:52. I stepped out of my hiding place and walked purposefully toward the ballroom entrance. A few guests near the back turned to look at me, but most eyes were focused on the bride. I heard a few whispered, "Who is that?" comments, but I kept walking. I made it halfway down the aisle before Victoria noticed me. The look on her face was priceless. Shock, horror, and rage all rolled into one. She half rose from her seat, her mouth opening as if to speak, but I kept walking. Jasmine reached the front of the aisle and turned to face the officiant. That's when she saw me. Our eyes met across the rows of seated guests. I saw confusion first, then recognition, then something that might have been relief. I smiled at her. The same smile I'd given her on her first day of school, on graduation day, on every important moment of her life when she'd needed to know that someone believed in her. The officiant, apparently unaware of the drama unfolding in front of him, began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. I kept walking until I reached the second row, right behind Victoria. There was an empty seat. Michael had made sure of that, and I sat down with all the dignity I could muster. Victoria turned around and hissed, "What do you think you're doing?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, loud enough for several people to hear, "I'm attending my daughter's wedding, Victoria, just like any loving mother would." The officiant continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "If anyone has any reason why this couple should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." The traditional pause followed. I could have spoken then. I could have stood up and said my piece about how they'd tried to exclude me, about how wrong it was to ask a mother to miss her daughter's wedding. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a handkerchief, one of my mother's old ones with delicate lace edges. I dabbed at my eyes, playing the part of the emotional mother perfectly. The ceremony continued. Richard and Jasmine exchanged vows. Beautiful, heartfelt words about love and commitment and building a life together. When they kissed and were pronounced husband and wife, I clapped as loudly as anyone. As the recessional began and the happy couple walked back down the aisle, Jasmine looked directly at me. This time, her expression was different. This time, she was smiling through her tears, and she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Chapter 11. The Reception Confrontation. The cocktail hour between the ceremony and reception was interesting. I found myself surrounded by curious guests who wanted to know who I was and how I fit into the wedding party. I handled each inquiry with grace and dignity. "I'm Dorothy Washington, Jasmine's mother," I would say, extending my hand for a shake. "I'm so pleased to meet you." Most people were polite, even warm. Several commented on how beautiful the ceremony was and how lovely Jasmine looked. A few mentioned that they could see the family resemblance, but I could feel Victoria's eyes on me the entire time, and I knew the real confrontation was coming. It happened near the bar, about 20 minutes into the cocktail hour. Victoria approached me with 2 other women I didn't recognize. Reinforcements, presumably. "I can't believe you had the audacity to show up here," she said, her voice low but venomous. "After everything we discussed." "We didn't discuss anything, Victoria. You tried to bribe me to stay away from my daughter's wedding. There's a difference." One of her companions, a thin woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, looked shocked. "Victoria, surely you didn't—" "This woman," Victoria said, gesturing at me like I was some kind of exhibit, "doesn't understand the kind of event this is. She doesn't belong here." I smiled sweetly. "You know what, Victoria? You're absolutely right. I don't belong in a room full of people who think money and social status are more important than family. but I do belong wherever my daughter is, and I'll be damned if I let you or anyone else tell me otherwise." The blonde woman was staring at Victoria now with obvious disapproval. "Victoria, this is Jasmine's mother. Of course she belongs here." "You don't understand, Margaret. This woman works in retail. She lives in a terrible neighborhood. She's not our kind of people." "Our kind of people?" Margaret's voice was getting louder, and other guests were starting to notice the conversation. "Victoria, what on earth has gotten into you?" That's when Mrs. Chen appeared at my elbow. "Dorothy, darling," she said in her most refined voice, "I've been looking for you. Come. There's someone I'd like you to meet." She smoothly extracted me from the group and led me toward a distinguished-looking older gentleman. "Dorothy, I'd like you to meet Judge Harrison. Judge, this is Dorothy Washington, Jasmine's mother and one of the finest women I know." The judge shook my hand warmly. "Mrs. Washington, your daughter is lovely. You must be very proud." "I am. Thank you. Mrs. Chen was just telling me about your work with the community literacy program. Very admirable." I glanced at Mrs. Chen, who winked at me. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I played along. "It's important work," I said simply. "Indeed it is. You know, my wife runs a foundation that supports educational initiatives in underserved communities. Perhaps we should discuss ways our organizations might collaborate." As we talked, I became aware that more and more guests were gravitating toward our conversation. Mrs. Chen had somehow positioned me as an important community leader, rather than just the mother who wasn't supposed to be there. It was masterful. Chapter 12. The Turning Point. The reception proceeded beautifully. Dinner was served, toasts were made, and I sat at a table with Mrs. Chen, Marcus, Sophia, and several other allies who had somehow managed to get themselves invited to the reception. I didn't ask how. Throughout the evening, I noticed something interesting happening. Despite Victoria's obvious displeasure at my presence, many of the guests were going out of their way to speak with me. Judge Harrison introduced me to several prominent community leaders. Mrs. Chen had somehow spread word about my extensive volunteer work, which was news to me, but I rolled with it. Sophia was discreetly taking photographs of me mingling with Chicago's elite, documenting my natural place among them. But the real turning point came during the traditional father-daughter dance. Since Jasmine's father wasn't in the picture, Richard's father was going to stand in for the traditional dance. I watched as the DJ announced the special dance, and Mr. Pemberton, a much kinder man than his wife, took Jasmine's hand and led her to the dance floor. As they began to dance, I could see the sadness in Jasmine's eyes. This should have been our moment, the moment where I got to dance with my baby girl at her wedding, the moment every mother dreams about. Instead, I was sitting at a table, watching from the sidelines like a stranger. But then something unexpected happened. As the song reached its midpoint, Mr. Pemberton said something to Jasmine that made her smile through her tears. He gestured toward me, and suddenly they were walking off the dance floor, hand in hand, coming directly to my table. "Mrs. Washington," Mr. Pemberton said, extending his hand to me, "I believe this dance belongs to you." I stared at him in shock. I don't understand. A father-daughter dance should include all the fathers and daughters who want to participate, he said kindly. And it seems to me that you've been more of a father to Jasmine than anyone else in her life. Jasmine was crying openly now. "Mama, will you dance with me? Please." I stood up slowly, hardly believing this was happening. As we walked to the dance floor together, I was aware of the entire room watching us. Victoria looked mortified, but I didn't care. This moment was about me and my daughter, not about her social anxiety. The DJ, clearly understanding what was happening, started the song over from the beginning. As Jasmine and I took our position on the dance floor, other couples joined us, including Mr. Brain Pemberton, with his own daughter from his first marriage, and several other parent-child combinations. "I'm sorry, Mama," Jasmine whispered as we swayed to the music. "I'm so sorry for all of this." "Hush now, baby," I said, holding her close. "We're here now. That's all that matters." As we danced, I could feel the attention of the room shifting. This wasn't the awkward disruption Victoria had feared. This was a moment of genuine emotion, of family love transcending social expectations. People were smiling, some were crying, and I heard more than one person comment on how touching it was to see a mother and daughter reunited. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous, and for the first time all evening, Victoria was completely silent. Chapter 13: The Real Victory. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and conversation. Guest after guest approached me to introduce themselves and tell me how lovely Jasmine was, how proud I must be. Several people mentioned that they'd heard about my community work from Mrs. Chen and wanted to know more about it. By the end of the evening, I had business cards from 3 different charity organizations, an invitation to speak at a literacy fundraiser, and a standing invitation to join Victoria's book club, which I was definitely not going to accept, but it was offered. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Jasmine found me again. "Mama, I want you to know something. When I was getting ready this morning, I kept thinking about you. I kept wishing you were there to help me with my dress, to give me advice, to tell me I looked beautiful." "You did look beautiful, baby. You always do." "I wanted to call you so many times. I wanted to uninvite Victoria's awful friends and invite you instead, but I was a coward." I took her hands in mine. "You're not a coward, Jasmine. You're young, and you were trying to navigate a difficult situation. But you need to remember something. You don't have to choose between the life you've built and the family that helped you build it. The right people will accept all of you, including where you came from." She nodded, tears threatening again. "I love you, Mama, and I'm proud to be your daughter." "I love you too, baby girl, always." As I watched her and Richard leave for their honeymoon, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. This day hadn't gone at all the way anyone had planned it, but it had ended exactly the way it should have. Chapter 14: The Aftermath. The story of what happened at Jasmine and Richard's wedding spread through Victoria's social circle like wildfire. Not the version Victoria wanted to tell, of course, but the truth, that she had tried to exclude the bride's mother from the wedding because she was embarrassed by her background. The reaction was swift and brutal. Several of Victoria's friends distanced themselves from her. The charity board she chaired asked for her resignation after 3 major donors expressed their disapproval of her behavior. Even her own country club began to question whether someone with such poor judgment regarding family values should remain a member. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen's fictional version of my community involvement became a reality. The Literacy Foundation contacted me about actually starting a program in my neighborhood. The charity organizations followed up on their invitations. Within a month of the wedding, I had more social engagements than I knew what to do with. But the best part was my relationship with Jasmine. She and Richard moved into a beautiful house in Lincoln Park, and she insisted that I have my own key. Every Sunday, we had dinner together, sometimes just the 2 of us, sometimes with Richard, sometimes with other family and friends. It became a tradition I treasured. 3 months after the wedding, she called me with news that changed everything. "Mama, I'm pregnant." I screamed so loud my neighbors probably thought someone was being murdered. When I calmed down enough to speak coherently, I said, "How far along are you?" 8 weeks. It's still early, but I wanted you to be the first to know." "What about Richard's parents?" "You're the first to know, Mama. You're going to be this baby's grandmother, and I want you involved in everything from day one." I cried then. Happy tears, proud tears, grateful tears. My baby was having a baby, and this time, no one was going to try to push me aside. Chapter 15: Full Circle. Jasmine's pregnancy went smoothly, and I was involved in every step. I went to doctor's appointments, helped set up the nursery, and even attended the baby shower that Victoria reluctantly hosted, and where I was seated at the head table as the grandmother-to-be. Victoria and I had reached a sort of detente. We weren't friends, we'd never be friends, but we were civil to each other for the sake of our shared grandchild. She'd learned, after the social fallout from the wedding, that excluding family members had consequences she wasn't prepared to face. 8 months later, I was in the delivery room when my granddaughter was born. Jasmine had insisted I be there, and Richard had backed her up. As I held that tiny, perfect baby for the first time, I thought about everything we'd been through to get to this moment. "What's her name?" I whispered. Jasmine smiled through her exhaustion. "Dorothy Mae Robinson, after her grandmother." I stared at my daughter in shock. "You're naming her after me?" "I'm naming her after the strongest woman I know. The woman who taught me that family isn't about money or social status. It's about love and loyalty and showing up when it matters." Little Dorothy Mae, Dolly, as we came to call her, became the light of my life. I babysat while Jasmine went back to work, taught her nursery rhymes, and spoiled her absolutely rotten. When she took her first steps, it was toward me. When she said her first word, it was grandmama. And when Victoria complained that the baby was getting too attached to me, Jasmine shut her down immediately. That's her grandmother, Victoria. Of course she's attached to her. And if you have a problem with that, you're welcome to see yourself out. The cycle had been broken. My granddaughter would grow up knowing she was loved and valued for exactly who she was, not for who others thought she should be. Epilogue. What I learned. It's been 2 years since that wedding day, and sometimes I still can't believe how much my life has changed. I'm still working, though I've cut back to just one job since the Literacy Foundation started paying me for my work. I'm still living in the same apartment, though Jasmine and Richard have offered to help me move to a nicer place. I told them I'm happy where I am, but I might take them up on it when Dolly gets old enough to have sleepovers. Most importantly, I've learned some things about myself and about family that I want to share with anyone who might be going through something similar. First, never let anyone convince you that you're not good enough to be part of your own family's life. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. But once you are family, no one has the right to exclude you based on their own prejudices or insecurities. Second, sometimes the people we love get caught up in trying to fit into worlds that don't value the things that matter most. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just fear. But that doesn't mean you have to accept being pushed aside. Sometimes you have to fight for your place at the table. Third, you'd be amazed how many people are willing to help when they hear about injustice. Mrs. Chen, Marcus, Sophia, Michael, none of them had to get involved in my drama, but they did because they recognized that what was happening was wrong. Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Fourth, dignity isn't about what you wear or where you live or how much money you have. Dignity is about knowing your worth and refusing to let others diminish it. I walked into that wedding knowing I belonged there because I was Jasmine's mother, and nothing Victoria could say or do would change that. And finally, love wins. It doesn't always win easily, and it doesn't always win quickly, but it wins. The love between a mother and daughter is stronger than social pressure, stronger than embarrassment, stronger than the opinions of people who don't matter. Jasmine and I are closer now than we've ever been. She tells me regularly how proud she is to be my daughter, how she wants Dolly to grow up with my strength and my values. Richard has become the son I never had, and even calls me Mom now. Victoria still calls me Mrs. Washington, but we can't have everything. The woman who tried to exclude me from the wedding because I wasn't good enough is now the same woman who has to watch me be celebrated as Mother of the Year at every family gathering. The woman who thought I would embarrass her family is now the same woman who has to sit quietly while her friends praise my grace under pressure and my admirable community work. But the real victory isn't Victoria's comeuppance. The real victory is the picture on my refrigerator, the one Sophia took at the wedding of Jasmine and me, dancing together during the mother-daughter dance that happened at the end of the evening. We're both crying in the picture, but we're smiling too, and you can see the love between us as clear as day. That picture reminds me every day that no one has the right to keep a mother from celebrating her daughter's happiness. And if they try, well, they better be prepared for Dorothy Mae Washington to take action, because some things are worth fighting for, and the love between a mother and her child is always worth the fight.